Hello everyone and welcome to a recap of a tournament which I just finished last weekend. I've recently made a return to over-the-board classical chess after a 1-year hiatus, and so I signed up for a local over-the-board chess tournament which was fairly close to home. For round number 1, I was paired up against the highest rated player in my section, a FIDE master by the name of Stephen Mail Kowuma. Now, he hasn't played chess so seriously for the past 10 years, but still a FIDE master is a FIDE master, and I knew it was going to be a tough game, especially considering I myself was more in the middle of the pack, right around seeded 7th. Okay, but returning back to the game, I was really excited to get this pairing, even though I knew it was going to be a difficult game, because I've not had the chance to play many FIDE Masters over the board. I've only played one FIDE Master in more of a match setting, which I was playing for my previous high school, and that game I did manage to get a draw, which I was very happy with, but this time I really wanted to make a strong comeback to classical chess and hopefully try and get a win, so we'll see how that goes. I started the game with pawn to d4, knight to f6, and c4. I knew that he was probably going to go for a King's Indian defense, which he did end up going for, and I went for the fianchetto variation, bringing my bishop out to g2. He does the same, and hopefully in the future this will have strong pressure on the queen side. So he castles, I castled, and knight to a6. Now this move caught me off guard. I wasn't particularly familiar with it. I only really know when the knight goes out to c6, and knight to a6 is a much more rare move. But I kind of played it in a similar way to the other line. I just played knight to c3, continuing my development, and he played pawn to c5 after a think. So you can see I recorded the times here, by the way, just to make sure that's all visible for you guys. Yeah, this is the first time I've recorded times in a classical game, and it really didn't make a big difference to my time consumption, so I think it's definitely a useful thing to do if you're looking to play some classical chess yourself. So pawn to c5 took a fairly long think for that, but I was expecting pawn to c5, and as a response I had pawn to d5 ready. I was also thinking maybe I go e4, but I didn't like the prospect of some captures here, and then the knight jumping in to c5. So something like this. I was like, probably this is decent for white, but why have I let his knight into the game if I don't have to? So I just played d5, and I was like, now your knight looks a bit stupid, because unless it wants to go to c7 and like play e6, I don't know, it doesn't have a clear way into the game. That's at least what I was thinking. But he went knight to c7, trying to get the knight into the game, and also preparing pawn to b5. But I was happy with my space advantage here. And I was also thinking that if this pawn ever moves forward, then maybe a knight can get to c6 in the future. It's quite a distant plan, but the c6 square would be much, much weaker. So even something like knight to d2 to b3 to a5 to c6 is potentially on the cards, even though it looks quite distant. So he goes knight c7. I played h3. I wasn't too happy. I was happy with this move at the time, but I wasn't super happy with it after playing, because e4 was the move that I wanted to play intuitively. This was my first thought. I was like, okay, on knight c7, I'm going to go e4, then I'm going to go e5. But the problem I had here was I didn't really like bishop to g4. And I was thinking about this move because obviously I wanted to play pawn to e5 earlier, but if he plays bishop g4 and I do something like h3 takes, bishop takes, then he can go knight d7, and I'm like, okay, now he's getting the knight to e5. And my light square bishop's not very good because it's blocked behind all the light square pawns. His dark square bishop's very strong, but it turns out that I misevaluated this bishop g4 quite a bit, because I could have just played a4. The idea is that I want to prevent b5, because he's almost threatening this pawn to b5 right now even, and this position is not so good for black. I mean, good for white, because now the bishop's open, the knight's looking good, a6, can play this like a Benko gambit kind of with really nice pressure, and my light square bishop looks a bit stupid. So once again, yeah, a4. If he goes a6 trying to play b5, then you can play a5, shut it down. And eventually, even though the knight would make it to this e5 square, the engine says that white's doing much, much better, because actually the bishop on e2 is nice and strong, defending this pawn on c4, and you can play pawn to f4, kick the knight away, and then have a good game with this bishop. This bishop on e2 is actually super, super good, and I didn't see this plan of repositioning the bishop to e2 and then playing f4, e5. So definitely something to know for the future, but I played h3, which is just a waste of time if you know that plan. So he goes a6, trying to play his b5 move. I try and stop it a little bit, and I play this weird little move, rook to a2. Now, the engine's not a huge fan of rook a2 for quite a concrete reason, but I thought it made a lot of sense, because if he now plays pawn to b5, which he did, the point is that I can go b3 and there's no more knight takes on d5, which would attack the knight. So just to demonstrate this, let's say I played some random move like, I don't know, pawn e4 now. Well then, after something like here and b3, if I try and do the same thing to keep my pawn structure nice and closed, then he can play knight takes on e4, or knight takes on d5, doesn't really matter. But the point's the same, is that this bishop's lasering me, and I'm going to lose the exchange. So rook to a2 gets out of the way of all that, because now on b5, I can play pawn to b3. The engine is not a big fan of pawn b3, but I thought it was quite useful, because otherwise black is going to take like this, and then have pressure on my b pawn. And if I ever do something like this, with takes, and then takes again, then after all the trades are said and done, then I have lots of pressure on the b pawn again. Black can easily pile up, and this position looks pretty awkward for white if he starts attacking my pawn here. I don't know, I might have to move the knight out of the way, and it's just not good. You don't want to play this game. This would be like a dream position for black. So instead of all that, I played pawn to b3. He took once after another long think. By the way, I had gained quite a big time advantage at this point, and I was feeling good about the position, even though the engine is giving a small edge for black, I think. No, it actually gives complete equality. So, okay, engine thinks that this game is going all right, recaptures, the rook comes in. I had seen all of this, by the way, on rook a2 from back here. This was part of my plan. I saw b5, b3 takes, rook b4, knight d2. And I also saw knight d7 and queen c2. But instead of all of that, and this rook b4 stuff after taking on c4, the engine actually really liked pawn to b4, which we both missed. Because after knight to b1, knight to e4, I had seen this, but I thought the bishop to b2 takes, and white's doing okay here. White solidified the position, and I thought black's given up all their pressure on the queen side. But actually, pawn to e6 is quite hard to meet for white. And the position becomes particularly unclear, especially with the knight possibly jumping in here with takes, the rook has to move, and then black has persistent pressure on this pawn, opening up this way, and the bishop coming into the game, and apparently black's activating quite quickly. But okay, we didn't manage to evaluate this one correctly. Instead, he went for rook to b4, and it was back to equal. I brought my queen up to protect the knight. Their knight jumped into the game, and I played this move, knight d1. And this was actually why I thought knight to e5 wasn't quite the best move, because I kind of want to play knight d1 anyway, so that I can play f4 here, put my knight on e3 to add extra protection, and also potentially to protect this bishop here if it ever wants to challenge the dark squared bishop of black. So I was feeling pretty good about my position, even though everything is on the retreat. It's actually just getting prepared for me to bounce back into the game after I thrust my pawns forward and I can put my pieces behind. Also, you can see he's got a massive time deficit at this point, only 11 minutes. Only 11 minutes for black, which is going to make life pretty difficult. So a5. This was another move that I had seen, and I thought that I was being super tricky with this knight to d1 move to try and provoke pawn to a5, because obviously he wants to play this knight to a6 or bishop to a6 so he can get the knight into b4. But now, after I kick the knight back, I thought, okay, now my knight's going to c3, and I've tricked you. I've forced your pawn forward so that now my knight can get to this outpost, and well, yeah, maybe your knight gets this outpost. I thought that this was going to be better for white. Once again, didn't quite evaluate this one correctly. Black's doing a little bit better, -1 position for black, so not super clear there. But all right, we have knight to b6, knight b5, knight goes to a6, and then I play e4. So this was the whole point. He's trying to bring his knights around this way so that he can try and put pressure on all of my pieces, and I'm trying to expand in the center. Ideally, I was thinking I want to play rook e1, bishop f1, and eventually bishop to b2, and then I can untangle, and I should have a big space advantage in the center. And if I can keep it all together, if I can keep my position together, then I should just be a lot better. But that's easier said than done, especially after my opponent's moved pawn to e6, where he's looking to try and break it up. He's much lower on time again. I've got quite a bit of time, but I really tanked here because I was struggling to find a move, and I ended up going for this move, bishop to b2. Here, the main reason I was thinking for so long is because I was looking at stuff like rook takes on b2, where after rook takes, there's knight b4, queen to b1, maybe bishop takes, but also maybe you just leave it on the board. And I was trying to evaluate this position, finding that very, very difficult to do. I was quite unsure about positions like this, where you might bring out the bishop to f5. And I was like, what's going on here? Do I want to pin myself? Do I play bishop to e4 and drop the h3 pawn? I was very, very confused about this position. And if I go this way, then maybe you can even try and start pushing forward this c pawn, and it all looks pretty scary, all looks pretty horrible. This rook's hanging, and I don't really know what I'm doing here. So yeah, I was pretty scared of this rook takes bishop move, but luckily it wasn't played. Instead, he captured this pawn on d5, so I captured the bishop. Very happy to see this. And after the king took, I took back with this pawn, so that I can still have hopes of playing this pawn thrust pawn to e5. And also, I no longer have to worry about the pressure on this c4 pawn, which was quite uncomfortable from this b6 knight. He played queen f6 because otherwise I was going to play queen c3. And it looks quite horrible to play this with pawn e5, knight e4, knight f6 coming. So you play queen f6 first, but then I rushed this move. And while it kind of works concretely, it's very suspicious for how this actually works out. And it was in a line which I did not see all the way to the end, I'll be completely honest. But my idea is very simple, which is that this move's a clearance sacrifice so that I can get my knight into the game, get my queen to c3, and then hopefully try and capture here, open it up, put my knight in. So if let's say I get the dream position after like takes here, let's say queen c3, and I don't even know. You'd have to do something pretty bad actually. Maybe something like this, and then if he does nothing, I was envisioning that I could get a position that looks a bit like this with like pawn e6, right? And the point is that I want to get some kind of checkmate on the dark squares with this knight and queen combo. So that's what I was really hoping for. It doesn't quite work like that, of course, because your opponent does want to fight. They don't just keel over and die. But yeah, this queen e7 move, I did see it. I kind of underestimated it as well. I underestimated the fact that after d6, queen e6, I can't play the move queen to c3 even though I want to, because then my rook on a2 is hanging. So I missed that little detail while the time was ticking down, and I was getting a little bit nervous here because, well, I have sacrificed a pawn, and I probably shouldn't be nervous because like, I don't know, black's pieces are all over the place, and mine is pretty well coordinated. I can just play something patient like king to h2. I was admittedly getting a little bit nervous, and I wanted to make something happen right now so that I can either regain the pawn 1 or start a big attack. Of course, the engine wants me to take it slow, play some random move like king h2 so that I can get my king off any checkable squares and then try and recuperate my pieces. But that's quite hard to do with not much time on the clock and a pawn down position. So I went knight g5, which is once again a good move, but does allow queen b3, which I had seen, but I just completely miscalculated after queen to b3, playing this move. Terrible, terrible move, by the way. F takes on e5. I didn't see queen e3. I spent all my time calculating queen g3, where I had some pretty complicated ideas, most of them revolving around knight to e4, trying to put the knight here, get the queen here, and also these e6 pawn sacrifices. But all of that was irrelevant because he just played queen e3, which drops a knight. So if your move drops a piece, then it probably doesn't matter that you've calculated some other pawn grab. I just dropped a piece. So he spent like the last little bit of time that he had just double checking. He was like, what? This guy has played a pretty decent game so far and just drops a piece. But it happens, I guess. I was falling under the pressure a little bit. However, I didn't give up here. I played queen f2. So I was feeling really sad here. Really like annoyed, frustrated. I was like, I thought I had a really good position against this FIDE master. I was up on time. I was up so much time. And I was starting to fall a little bit, just a little bit, into that negative spiral. But I took some breaths. I regathered myself and I looked at this position objectively and I was like, well, you know, I've still got 2 pawns here in a blitz game. No dark squared bishop for the king. You know, it's a little bit weak. And then I started to look at it more concretely, even out of the abstract stuff. And I was like, hold on, after the queen takes the knight, I play h4. It looks a little bit awkward. The queen doesn't have many squares, right? If it goes this way, then I've got discoveries with the rook by moving the queen out of the way, right? And if it moves to h6, it's super sidelined. And if it moves to d8, then it's also kind of out of the game. And it was at this point when I played queen f2 that I was like, okay, so I go h4, the queen goes back. And I used my last little bit of time to play this absolutely devious move, knight a7. And it was here that the white initiative started to shine in low time, 35 seconds, 40 seconds each, both of us just living on the increment here. Knight goes into a7. He plays bishop d7 because you have to stop knight to c6, otherwise white is pretty much back in the game, kicking the queen out and queen f6 possibilities. But on bishop d7, I just played rook e2, sorry, keeping the position together and trying to play this pawn to e6 in the future. He plays h5, a little bit of a waiting move. I don't think he was struggling to come up with a plan here because actually the black position is kind of dodgy. It's hard to move any of the pieces very clearly, and this knight's quite out of the game as well. This extra knight the black has is not exactly doing anything. And in low time, I managed to find this move, bishop to h3. And this move created chaos. That was my goal. I just want to make things as complicated and chaotic as possible. And my idea is that after the bishop captures it, I go knight to c6 with the fork, but I'm not looking to take the rook here. My point is that after the queen moves out of the way, I go queen f6, and then I go knight to e7. And now I'm creating threats here, like knight takes on g6 and knight to f5. So like after they potentially take my rook, I was like knight f5. And now it's getting very difficult because if you capture here, then it's just a dead draw because the king is stuck in a box. So I was coming up with these tricks on the fly, but I think he probably missed the move rook to g8 here with black being okay. But even now, e6 looks crazy to me. And the point is that if you take here, then I can play this move, right? And now the rook is under attack. He can't even play queen e3 because the knight's covering it. So how do you even evaluate this position with black? You're like, what's going on? I'm up 15 points of material, but this is looking absolutely manic. So low time scramble position, very difficult to evaluate here. Let me just check. It turns out there's only one winning move for black. Everything else is drawing or better for white. And that one winning move is rook to b1. I very much doubt either of us saw that. And the point is that you play rook to h1. You sacrifice the rook. And then you get the king to a light square, move the bishop out, and then get the queen in. Okay, that's completely ridiculous to see with 30 seconds left, some 8-move combination. I reckon both of us probably saw up to like rook to g8 and then were scared of this e6 move. But anyway, going back to the game, he instead played knight to d5, which I thought was an excellent try. The point being that I cannot deflect the queen away effectively from the f6 square, because if I take the bishop here, then the queen takes. I can't go queen to f6 with these plans of trying to bring the knight into the game. I don't even really know how the knight would get in, but I can't play this queen f6 move because the knight's covering it. So I was like, okay, that's very nice. But I did take anyway because I saw another trick in the position, which is pawn to e6. The point is that it's a knight sacrifice. You can't really take it easily though, because then I play e7 and I attack your rook, and then I'm playing queen takes on f7, and you might be getting in some trouble here. Probably black's still winning, but I'm not 100% sure. You can't move the rook. I know that. But okay, white is winning this position, and black has to play f6. Give up this piece here, and then, yeah, white's kind of in the driver's seat because the 2 knights for the rook are just completely scattered on the wrong side of the board. But instead, after e6, he just takes my pawn, which I was expecting, and I had prepared this absolutely manic move, knight to c8, playing once again in the confusion, trying to throw as many haymakers as possible. This is a knight sacrifice here. If you take the knight, then I'm playing queen f7. And unfortunately for me, it actually just dries up completely after e7 because black can play queen takes on g3. But yeah, I don't really know what was missed here. I think my opponent was just panicking at this point and thinking that things had gone terribly wrong if they captured here. Maybe I could also play pawn captures and try and sneak something through with the rook, but it's all very speculative, and I'm down loads of material now. So my opponent should have taken there. They should have, but they didn't. They instead played queen to d8, trying to maintain the control of the f-pawn and the f6 square. They were definitely seeing some ghosts, but luckily I had this other move. And by the way, just to go back here, It's the only winning move. The only winning move is to take the knight. So you must accept the knight. Everything else is drawish. But he plays queen d8 and allows the spectacular pawn to e7. I did forget to give this an exclamation mark, but it is, of course, the only move in the position, attacking the queen and the rook, guarded by the knight, which is just, I don't even know. That is like a phantom pony jumping into the game and saving it from the back rank. Absolute imposter right there. But the point is that now the f6 square is once again available, and you have to take it, because if you take this way, then I'm just taking like this. And once again, we've got this kind of chaotic position, or there might be something better here, actually. Maybe there's something better. No, I think I would probably just take the rook, but he didn't want to allow that. He didn't want to allow that, and instead played knight takes on e7 and allowed queen to f6. So that's the point. I'm deflecting both pieces from guarding this f6 square by forcing the knight to take and interpose the queen. So now after queen f6, he played the final blunder, which actually turned the game around in my favor. Now, all the way here, I was like, okay, now I've saved the draw, because I was expecting this move king to h7. And the point is that after king h7, I would play rook e7. And after he takes my knight, I would sack the queen, play rook takes, and I would just make a draw like this, because otherwise I'm actually in a lot of trouble. Like if I play knight takes instead, then all of a sudden he might be able to trade the queens like this, like that, and it's not so obvious anymore. He's up 2 pawns. The knight's a little bit sidelined, but I'm probably going to lose some endgame here, so I'd have to sack the queen. But once again, the tale of the story, I managed to keep my composure just a little bit better. We're both rusty, I think, coming back to OTB chess, but maybe all this blitz work online has paid off, because he blundered and I played knight takes on e7. King moved out of the way, and I grabbed the pony on the side of the board. That very dodgy knight, which went to a6 oh so long ago, has now perished. And all that's left for black to do is give one more check. My king moves to the side. He plays rook b2, trying to, get some counterplay going. And actually, this is a very strong move and would have potential to bring back into the game if it wasn't for the brilliant finishing blow. Try and find it yourself. But the move is rook takes on f7, the only clearly winning move. And the point is that after the rook takes it, I played queen takes on g6, and he resigned the game because there is an inevitable checkmate in one move on the next go, or a mate in 3, or a mate in 3 if you want to be more flashy. So yeah, I was very happy with this game for round number 1. I think this is probably, this is the first FIDE Master that I've beaten in a classical tournament, so I was feeling great about that. Moving into round number 2 of the Eastleigh Open. Please let me know in the comments if you are interested in seeing round number 2 all the way up to round number 5. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. And if you want to try out some coaching with me, then my email address is in the description. You just have to leave me a message. So yeah, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.